The sun didn't rise in Brookside, Alabama. It rolled in like thick honey, sticking to everything it touched. Mornings arrived slow and heavy, and by the time Micah Taylor stepped outside, the heat was already pressing down on the porch like another layer of skin. 15 years old and already tired of trying to fit, Micah moved through the world as if he were always trying not to take up too much space. His shoulders curved inward, his words came soft, and his eyes rarely stayed up long enough to meet anyone else's. He wasn't like the other boys at Brookside High, the ones who spat jokes like gum wrappers and pushed their way through the hallways with loud voices and louder footsteps. They talked about girls with bravado, played basketball on cracked courts, and called each other men like it meant something. Micah wasn't any of that. He didn't speak unless called on. He didn't run laps in gym class, just walked them. His only constant companion was a tattered, spiral-bound notebook he carried everywhere. Inside it were poems, some short, some too long, all full of things he couldn't say out loud. He lived with his mother, Tanya, who worked night shifts at the nursing home, and his grandmother, Ruth, who ran the house with quiet strength. Ruth had deep brown skin, silver hair tucked under a scarf, and the kind of eyes that looked right through you but never made you feel naked. She didn't say much, but she saw everything. And when she cooked, it was always enough for whoever might show up hungry, even if no one ever did. Micah didn't tell Ruth much about the war inside him, how he felt when he looked at some boys, or how lonely he felt even when surrounded by people. But he had a feeling she already knew. She just didn't push. Micah joined the theater club by mistake. He'd missed the bus home and wandered into the auditorium to kill time. On stage, 5 students were reading from a script under the eye of Mr. Hawkins, a sharp-dressed man with glasses and a voice like late-night radio. "You here to join?" Mr. Hawkins asked, not looking up. "No," Micah said, hesitating. "Well, sit anyway. Quiet's allowed in here." Micah sat, and stayed. He never auditioned, but he painted backdrops. Taped down stage marks helped organize props. He liked how the theater smelled, old wood and worn velvet, and how nobody asked him why he wasn't talking more. It was the only place in school where silence didn't feel like failure. 2 weeks into rehearsal, a new boy joined the club. Elliot Reyes. From Atlanta. Elliot had brown skin, big curls, a denim jacket covered in enamel pins, and a presence that made people either stare or look away. He was black and Puerto Rican, tall, and unapologetically himself. He walked like he had his own soundtrack playing, and talked like he didn't owe anyone permission. Micah noticed the way Elliot carried himself immediately, like a flame flickering in slow motion. Elliot read his lines with fire, adding his own flavor, breaking character mid-script to make people laugh. Mr. Hawkins should have corrected him. Instead, he smiled and let him keep going. Micah watched from the side of the stage, heart fluttering in a way he didn't understand, or maybe didn't want to understand. The next day, they ended up walking home in the same direction. Elliot had headphones on, one earbud dangling. "You like Maxwell?" he asked, offering the other bud. Micah nodded. They walked in silence, Maxwell crooning between them. The sun was hot, but the music made it feel easier to breathe. "You always this quiet?" Elliot asked, not unkindly. "Sometimes." "That's cool. Quiet people see stuff the rest of us miss." From that day on, they walked home together after every rehearsal. Elliot always had music. Erykah Badu, Jill Scott, Lauryn Hill. And he'd hum along as they walked past chain-link fences and small houses with creaking porches. Micah started to write about Elliot, not directly, but his poems changed. They had rhythm now, light, a heartbeat. One night he wrote a piece titled "Boy with a Storm in His Chest." It was about a boy who laughed too loud and made the world feel electric. The next day, Micah folded it neatly and slipped it into Elliot's locker and signed. He didn't say anything, but that afternoon, Elliot smiled a little longer at him before handing him an earbud. They didn't talk about it. They didn't have to. Micah's chest began to ache in a way that felt like blooming. Micah didn't know if it was love. He just knew that the walk home felt different now, that the air felt lighter when Elliot was near, that the days between rehearsals felt longer, and that every poem in his notebook had somehow started tracing the outline of a boy. He started to feel more alive, and more afraid. Brookside wasn't the kind of town where boys like Micah got to be soft in public. It wasn't built for difference. It was built on habits, rules, and reputations. Anything outside that mold got boxed up, labeled, and left to the side. Everyone knew that, especially Micah. But on Friday evening after rehearsal, something shifted. The auditorium was empty except for them. Micah sat on the edge of the stage, feet swinging just above the floor. Elliot paced the stage with a script in hand, reading a monologue. The gold light from the ceiling spots bathed the space in warmth, and the silence between Elliot's lines felt sacred. "You ever kissed anyone?" Elliot asked suddenly, closing the script. Micah blinked. "No." Elliot walked closer, head tilted, a cautious smile pulling at his lips. "Me neither, but I think about it sometimes. About what it's supposed to feel like." Micah looked at him, really looked. At the soft curve of his mouth. At the quiet nerves hiding in his eyes, despite all his usual confidence. Elliot stepped closer. His voice dropped. "Can I?" Micah didn't answer with words, just nodded. The kiss was brief, just a press of lips, more heart than certainty, but it was real, honest, and it made something inside Micah unravel and settle at the same time. Then the auditorium door opened. A gasp. Footsteps. Gone. They stood frozen. By Monday morning, everyone knew. Micah didn't need confirmation. The way kids stared in the hallway told him everything. So did the silence in the cafeteria, the sudden shoves in the locker room, the slurs whispered just loud enough to sting. He returned to his locker to find FAG written in black marker across the metal. A wad of paper thrown at his back when he walked to class. A muttered, "Keep that nasty shit to yourself." Elliot stopped sitting with him. He wasn't cruel about it, just absent. Micah understood. Being alone was easier than being a target. The poem stopped for a while. His pen stuttered every time it hit the page. At home, Ruth didn't ask questions, but her eyes followed him longer now. She noticed how he barely touched his food, how he stayed in his room too long, how the light had dimmed behind his face. "You're carrying something heavy," she said one evening, folding laundry with firm, steady hands. "And I may not know what it is, but I see it." Micah sat on the floor near her chair. He didn't cry, but his eyes burned. She looked at him with something deeper than understanding. "I don't care what people say. That softness in you, that's not a flaw. That's a gift. Don't let them shame you out of your light." Micah didn't answer, but he heard her. That night he wrote again. All of it. The kiss, the guilt, the fear, Elliot's quiet withdrawal, the shame he couldn't name, the ache of 1,000 unsaid things. He left the notebook on his nightstand. The next morning it had been moved, just slightly. At breakfast, his mother placed a bowl of hot grits in front of him. No words, just the right amount of butter, just the way he liked it when he was a child. No one said anything, but that was their way of saying everything. Later that week, the school quietly canceled the play. "Too mature," the principal said. "Concerns from parents." Mr. Hawkins didn't argue. He just packed up the props and scripts with a face like glass. Calm on the outside cracked beneath. Micah stopped going to theater. He avoided the auditorium. He avoided Elliot. He avoided himself. But one afternoon, walking past the drama room, he saw Mr. Hawkins taping shut a cardboard box. Micah stood in the doorway. "I didn't say anything," he confessed. "When they went after him, I just stayed quiet." Mr. Hawkins looked up, eyes tired but kind. "You're 15, he said. "You're still learning to speak. You're allowed to be afraid, but don't live there. Fear's a place you pass through, not a home." Micah nodded. The words sank deep. 2 days later, he found Elliot sitting behind the gym, sketching in a notebook. His curls were tied back, and his fingers smudged with pencil. Micah approached slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. Elliot didn't look up. "For what?" "For letting them talk about you. For disappearing." "You didn't do anything to me," Elliot said. "You just didn't do anything." Micah stood there in silence, shame curling around his ankles. "I was scared," he admitted. "Still am." Elliot finally looked up. "Yeah, me too." They didn't hug, didn't touch. But when Micah sat down beside him, Elliot didn't move away. For the first time in weeks, that silence between them felt soft again. The final month of school crept in without warning, and the air in Brookside turned thick with humidity and tension. Micah kept walking the hallways like he was still holding his breath. Elliot didn't speak to him every day, but sometimes he nodded across the cafeteria. A small thing, but it felt like enough. It meant the world hadn't closed its doors completely. When Mr. Hawkins quietly posted a flyer for the school's end-of-year open mic night, Micah stood staring at it longer than he should have. Most students only went to clown around, show off, or kill time before summer. But something about the word open stuck with him, like maybe it meant more than just the mic. That night, Micah pulled out his notebook. The pages were a little more worn now, the corners bent and soft. He flipped through every poem, some written in pain, some in hope, all of them pieces of him. He stayed up past midnight, crafting one that felt like truth. He read it aloud once to his empty room. It sounded shaky but real. The night of the open mic, he stood backstage in the dim light of the school gym, fingers tight around his journal. The bleachers were filled with half-interested students, chewing gum and scrolling through flip phones. A couple of teachers sat near the front. Mr. Hawkins gave him a small nod from across the room. When Micah's name was called, his legs felt hollow. He walked up to the mic. The lights made it hard to see anyone clearly, just shadows and outlines. He opened his notebook. His hands were shaking. "This is for the ones who walk too soft," he began, "who speak in whispers because the world only listens when you scream. For the ones who flinch in locker rooms, who hide the truth in notebooks and eye contact and silence. For the boys who kissed someone and called it shame. And for the ones who stopped hiding." His voice grew steadier. He read the rest, slowly, line by line. When he finished, there was no applause, just silence. But it wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was still. And in that stillness, Micah felt weight lift from his chest. He stepped away from the mic and walked off the stage with his chin higher than it had been in months. Outside, the night was warm. Summer buzzed in the distance. He looked up at the sky, cloudless, wide. At home, Ruth was sitting on the porch, rocking slowly with a cup of tea. "You were brave tonight," she said. Micah blinked. "You weren't there." "I didn't have to be," she said, her voice low. "I felt it. Besides, someone sent me a video." Micah's cheeks warmed. She smiled and patted the space beside her. They sat in silence, listening to the night. "You know," she said softly, "when I was your age, we didn't even have the words for what you're figuring out now. Didn't mean the feelings weren't there. Just meant we had to hide them deeper." Micah looked at her, surprised, but she didn't elaborate. She just said, "You're growing into someone the world might not understand yet. That doesn't mean you stop growing." Micah nodded. "I don't want to be scared anymore," he whispered. Ruth looked over at him. "Then don't be. But when you are, just don't be alone in it." The next day, Elliot passed him in the hall. Instead of a nod, he paused. "That poem," Elliot said. Micah waited. "It was good. Brave." Micah smiled. "Thanks." Elliot leaned against the locker beside him. "You want to walk home again?" "Yeah," Micah said. "I do." And they did. No music, no earbuds, just footsteps and the quiet sounds of a town slowly letting go of something. That summer, Micah wrote more poems than ever. He read them at open mics downtown. He started putting them online, anonymously at first, then eventually under his name. He didn't become popular. He didn't stop being soft, but he stopped shrinking. He took up space, not loudly, not all at once, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to live, enough to love. In a town like Brookside, Alabama, that was a revolution. And it was only the beginning. Thanks for watching.